4 years have passed since my sister Stephanie died, but the memory of her still haunts me, not just in my mind, but I fear in a much more literal sense. Stephanie was 3 years older than me, and she had always been a loving and supportive sister, despite the strange and terrifying dreams that plagued her from the age of 12. Stephanie believed, with a conviction that frightened our parents, that she would not live past 18. At first, my parents dismissed her fears as an overactive imagination or teenage melodrama, but her dreams were not mere figments of her imagination. They were dark, vivid premonitions that she would describe in chilling detail. She spoke of shadowy figures whispering her name, of dark, endless corridors, and of a presence that promised to take her away. As her 16th birthday approached, Stephanie's condition worsened. She became withdrawn and skittish, her once vibrant personality clouded by an ever-present sense of dread. My parents, increasingly worried, began taking her to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist prescribed medications and therapy sessions, but nothing seemed to help. In fact, it only seemed to make things worse. At night, Stephanie's behavior turned bizarre and frightening. She would wander the house, her eyes glazed over as if she was sleepwalking, but with a sense of purpose that chilled us to the bone. Sometimes, she would speak in a voice that wasn't hers, uttering strange and nonsensical phrases. My parents grew scared of her, and the love and concern they had once felt began to turn into something like fear. They were afraid of their own daughter, afraid of what she might do or become. Despite all this, my relationship with Stephanie remained strong. She was the best sister anyone could ask for. She never let her fears or her condition affect the way she treated me. She would still help me with my homework, share secrets with me, and comfort me when I had nightmares of my own. But I could see the fear in her eyes, and it broke my heart that I couldn't help her. Then, one night, our worst fears came true. I woke up to the sound of my mother screaming. I rushed to Stephanie's room, but it was too late. At the age of 17, just months away from her 18th birthday, Stephanie had taken her own life. The sight of her lifeless body is something I can never erase from my memory. The grief and guilt that consumed me were overwhelming. We had failed her. I had failed her. The house felt emptier after Stephanie's death. My parents and I drifted through the days in a haze of sorrow and regret. But it wasn't long before strange things began to happen. The first time it happened, I was walking past her room late at night. I heard a soft, familiar sound that stopped me in my tracks. It was Stephanie's laughter. It was so distinct, so undeniably hers, that I felt a chill run down my spine. I thought I was going crazy, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, a few nights later, my mother pulled me aside. She looked pale and shaken, and she asked me if I had heard anything unusual. I hesitated, but then nodded. She confessed that she had heard Stephanie's laughter too, and not just that. Then she could smell her perfume in the hallway. The realization that we were both experiencing these phenomena was terrifying and comforting in equal measure. We weren't alone in this. But what did it mean? We tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was our minds, desperate for a connection to Stephanie, conjuring up these experiences. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the occurrences only became more frequent and more intense. Objects in Stephanie's room would move on their own. Her bed would sometimes appear as if someone had been lying in it, and always, there was that laughter, echoing through the silent house. I don't know if it was Stephanie's spirit trying to communicate with us or something darker. Something that had plagued her in life and continued to linger after her death. Sometimes I think back to those strange phrases she would utter at night, the voice that wasn't hers. Whatever had haunted her dreams had followed her, even after death. I don't have answers, only questions that gnaw at my sanity. My mother and I have tried everything to put Stephanie's spirit to rest. We've had the house blessed, spoken to mediums, and performed countless rituals, but nothing seems to work. The laughter persists. The scent of her perfume still lingers, and every so often I catch a glimpse of her in the corner of my eye. Just for a moment, before she vanishes again. Living with this has been a nightmare of its own. I miss my sister terribly, and part of me wants to believe that it's her, that she's trying to tell us something. But another part of me is terrified that we will never find peace. That whatever plagued Stephanie in life has now become a permanent fixture in our lives. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel lost and helpless, just as I did when Stephanie was alive and struggling with her nightmares. I share my story here in the hope that someone might have an explanation or a solution. Is it really my sister's spirit trying to communicate with us? Or is it something more sinister? And if it is Stephanie, what is she trying to tell us? If anyone has any insight or advice, please, I'm begging you, help us. I'm 27 now, but the memory of that night still creeps into my thoughts, especially when I'm alone. It was the last year of high school, just a few months before graduation. The excitement of freedom was intoxicating, and we often found ourselves pushing the limits, seeing how far we could go before the responsibilities of adulthood would clamp down on us. It was a Friday night, and I was eager to blow off some steam. My friends Lily and Ethan convinced me to sneak out to a party. My parents, ever the light sleepers, would never have allowed it, but I was good at slipping out unnoticed. The party was at some guy's house about 20 minutes away. He was in the same grade, but we barely knew him. It didn't matter. We were just looking for a good time. The night started off great. The music was loud. Drinks flowed freely, and for a while we forgot about everything else. But as the hours ticked by, Lily started to get nervous. Her mom was strict, and she feared getting caught. Reluctantly, we decided to leave. Driving back, we opted for a shortcut through an old, dark neighborhood. It was a place where time seemed to stand still. The kind of area where streetlights were few and far between, casting eerie shadows that danced in the corner of your eye. I had a bad feeling about it, but I didn't say anything. I just wanted to get home and crawl into bed before my parents noticed I was gone. As we turned onto one of the narrower streets, something caught my eye. There, at the end of the block, lay a dog. It wasn't moving. My first thought was that it had been hit by a car. I slowed down and pulled over. Curiosity getting the better of us, we got out of the car and approached it cautiously. What we saw will haunt me forever. The dog wasn't just hit by a car. Its body was twisted in unnatural ways, its fur matted with blood. There were deep gashes along its side, and its eyes were wide open, frozen in terror. It had been tortured. The realization hit us like a punch to the gut. Lily gasped, covering her mouth with her hands, and Ethan turned away, retching. A sudden chill ran down my spine. We weren't alone. I could feel eyes on us, watching from the darkness. I glanced around, trying to pierce the black void with my eyes, but I saw nothing, just the oppressive darkness. "Let's get out of here," I whispered, my voice trembling. We scrambled back into the car, and I floored it, desperate to put as much distance between us and that horrific scene as possible. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the dog's mutilated body. I tossed and turned, finally drifting into a fitful sleep, only to be plagued by nightmares. In my dreams, I was back in that dark street, but this time, I was the one being watched, the one being hunted. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed, feeling like a zombie. My parents were already at the breakfast table as I sat down. Our cat, Oliver, who had always been affectionate and gentle, suddenly arched his back, hissing at me. His fur stood on end, and his eyes were wide with fear. He made a sound I had never heard before, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. "What's gotten into him?" my dad asked, bewildered. Before I could respond, Oliver lunged at me, claws outstretched. He scratched my arm before my dad could grab him and carry him into another room. We were all stunned. Oliver had never shown any aggression before. He was always a calm, loving pet. For weeks, Oliver acted like I was some kind of monster. He'd hiss and growl whenever I was near, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and hatred. My parents were concerned, but they chalked it up to some kind of strange cat behavior. Eventually, it got so bad that we had to give Oliver to a family friend. I hated to see him go, but it was clear he couldn't stay. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed that night. It was as if we had crossed some invisible line, stumbled upon something we were never meant to see. The memory of the dog haunted me, and the way Oliver reacted made me wonder if he sensed something about me that I couldn't see. The house was perfect, or at least it seemed to be when we first moved in. Nestled on a quiet street in a small town, it promised a fresh start, a peaceful life. The paint was fresh, the garden, well tended, and the neighborhood friendly. It was everything we had dreamed of. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, something shifted. My husband, Tom, works night shifts at the hospital. His absence during the long, dark hours left me alone with my thoughts, and, more disturbingly, with the house itself. The first time I heard the noise, it was a soft, almost imperceptible tapping, like a branch against the window. I dismissed it as the wind and tried to sleep, but as the nights went by, the sounds grew louder and more persistent. They always started after 3 a.m., as if on a schedule. It wasn't long before the noises became more than just tapping. There were whispers, faint but unmistakable, seeping through the walls. I would lie in bed, paralyzed by fear, straining to make out words in the incoherent murmur. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, the result of too many late-night horror movies and too little sleep. But deep down, I knew it was real. One night, the sounds changed. Instead of whispers, I heard something heavier. A soft thud followed by dragging. It was as if someone was moving furniture in the attic. The only problem was, we didn't have an attic. I needed to prove to myself, and to Tom, that I wasn't going crazy. So, I decided to record the noises. I set my phone to record and placed it on the nightstand. As the clock ticked past 3 a.m., the familiar sounds began. I forced myself to stay awake, heart pounding, listening to the thuds and whispers. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I nervously played back the recording. The sounds were faint, but there. What struck me most, though, was a steady, rhythmic noise overlaying everything else. It took me a moment to realize it was breathing, heavy, labored breathing. That wasn't mine. I showed the recording to Tom. He listened intently, his face growing pale. "It's just interference," he said, trying to sound confident. "Maybe you picked up some radio signals or something," but his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. Night after night, the noises continued, and the breathing grew louder, more pronounced. I felt watched, as if unseen eyes followed my every move. I started avoiding certain parts of the house, especially the hallway where the sound seemed to be the loudest. One particularly stormy night, with rain lashing against the windows, the noises escalated. The whispers turned into moans, the thuds into bangs. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling, and pressed record. This time, I decided to confront whatever was haunting me. With the phone's flashlight guiding my way, I followed the sounds to the hallway. The air was thick, oppressive, making it hard to breathe. I reached the end of the hall where an old ornate mirror hung. The noises were deafening now, coming from behind the mirror, summoning every ounce of courage. I reached out and lifted the mirror off the wall. Behind it, instead of the expected solid wall, there was a small, hidden door. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The breathing was louder than ever, echoing up the stairs. I stepped back, horrified, and slammed the door shut, rehanging the mirror in a frantic rush. I ran back to the bedroom, locking the door behind me, and called Tom, my voice shaking. "There's something in the house," I whispered. "Behind the mirror, there's a staircase. I don't know where it leads, but I can hear breathing." Tom promised to come home as soon as he could. I sat on the bed, clutching the phone, listening to the recording. The breathing was joined by a voice, faint but clear. It whispered my name over and over, mingling with the rain and wind. I didn't sleep that night, nor did I dare move. When Tom finally arrived, we investigated together. But when we lifted the mirror, the door was gone, replaced by a solid wall. There was no staircase, no hidden space, only a mark where the door handle had been. We moved out shortly after that, but the memory lingers, haunting me. The house had secrets, and for a brief moment, it let me in. But some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed.